Hey, we have another Photoshop tutorial. We're gonna make a vintage sports ticket. I was watching a video discussion or talk with Annie Atkins, who's one of my favorite graphic designers, always inspirational to me. She does it for filmmaking and makes all these awesome props that are used throughout movies and signs and newspapers and all these cool looking artifacts. And I thought that would be something fun to do in my with my advanced graphic design students as a little project. Obviously, we're going to do ours digitally. I don't have the skill and talent that she has to make them like actual, but using Photoshop and using the tools that we use in class, I thought it would be a fun project inspired by her work. And in North Platte in 1967, there was actually a NFL preseason game, an AFL preseason game actually, played in our high school at the football field. And I thought, what a cool thing to talk a little bit about the history of the school and to make a graphic that of something of how we imagine what the tickets would have looked like. I have some fonts listed in the description below and some other assets there. Using the inspiration, I looked at a lot of Oakland Raider at the time, Oakland Raider at the time, football tickets and some AFC championship tickets to kind of get an idea of this. So did a little bit of research, and we're going to come up with a ticket for the 1967 Centennial Bowl, played in North Platte, Nebraska at what is now Bauer Field. So that's what we got. So this is a 3 inches tall by 5 inches wide. And to kind of get started here, I'm just going to use the rectangle tool just to kind of fill this in. And for the colors, let me first put in the rectangle. My edges are rounded, so using these little circle handles, I can click and drag those and make those not be round anymore. And I'll drag this to the end, resize it a little bit just to have this be a narrow strip up here. And I have a color picked out, so down here in the fill section, choose my color selector, and let's try with a 00 AEFF. Yeah, it's light blue. I like that. Alright, so got that there. We can right click and duplicate this layer. I'm just going to have these be separate so that way we can always adjust the sizes later if needed with these. And then I'll duplicate this one more time and bring this one down. Oh, about to here, I think. We can actually, I'll tell you what, these two here, I might even, or not those two, this first rectangle and the second one, I might make those both be just a little bit narrower. Size them at the same way so they kind of stay the same size, and then that will allow me to move this one here, that, and I'll Control T it and hold Shift and drag this to the end. And I think it's just a little bit more room. Doesn't have to be exact, you know. I'm just kind of eyeballing this a little bit, and I think this will work just fine. Next, Once I have those rectangles done, I am going to add another rectangle. But this one is zoom in here a little bit, and let me get back here to this rectangle tool again, and move this here, and I change these corners again, make those square, and these are just going to be real narrow, and one I'll have be about right here, and then I can duplicate, or actually then I'm going to change the fill for that one to be white. Make sure it's all the way white, not off-white. I can duplicate that layer, and then bring this one down here to the bottom. I think this might be bring us in pretty good shape to get started here, I think. Alright, so that's kind of the grid, I guess, or the kind of layout that I want to use for this. Now for some of the text on this. So using my type tool, and I can just click anywhere for right now, and this typeface that I want to use for here, I'm going to go with Arial and black. Resize this just to make it a little bit smaller so I can see what's going on. Control T for that shortcut if you're looking for that. And I'm going to type in here something for the section and row and seat. Alright, and then I'll Control T this again, rotate this around, and I want to put this in the blue area actually, so I'm going to shrink this down with Control T a little bit more there. And if I put this just with a little bit of space underneath it, I can click here, and I'll try to kind of eyeball it as best I can. Try to have them reasonably equally spaced out. That looks pretty good. Okay. Once I have that finished, then I can highlight this. Just double click in that little T, and we select white for the color. Alright, that looks good. Next part that we have on here, we'll go to our type tool again, and for this one we want to use Arial, but instead of black we'll use Arial Narrow Bold. I know you may be thinking, I hope we are going to be using some more exciting typefaces than Arial. This looks pretty close to what was used a lot in those tickets, but we will have some variety here in a little bit. This one here, I'll type in General Admission, and it was $6 to attend this game. It was like 10 something, I believe, for reserved seating. General admission of the game was this, and actually I'll go ahead and change, I'll highlight that, and select the color up here and click in the blue area with that color selector. It's going to allow us to go with a little matching theme here. I feel like Photoshop has changed their resizing rules so many times. I always forget when I'm supposed to hold shift and when I'm not supposed to now. Here we go. So I'm just getting it close to where it's kind of aligned with that letter and this letter down here. And I think that looks good. I should bring this up higher, this layer higher, so that it's above that rectangle. Actually, let's bring that rectangle layer down. All right. I think that looks good. So with that done, we can kind of move on to the next part. So this, we'll go to our shapes, custom shapes. And up here we have a lot of different ones. I'm going to go to the legacy shapes and more. Then if I find the 2019 shapes and I scroll down, a whole lot of things in here, but one of them that they have with Photoshop is sports equipment. And I like this football. I mean, it is really something that looks kind of retro-y with the design of it. I rotate it sideways here so it looks like this. And for right now, I'm just going to have it in here where we're at, just so that it is easier to work with. And if I take the shape tool again and I select a ellipse tool, this does not have to be exact. I'm going to have it fit close to that of the football, of the size and the shape. And I'm going to drop down the opacity of this ellipse a little bit so I can still see the football underneath it. And try to center this as close as I can right over the top of the football. And I may need to even bring this in on the sides just a little bit. Maybe I will shorten it just a little too. Get it right about here again. I think that looks good. Alright, and going to the type tool, the horizontal type tool, and if I move my cursor over the edge of that ellipse, you'll see it changes shape a little bit right there. You get that wavy line. If I click on that, I can actually type around that circle. Looks like Pac-Man right now. But if I type in AFC, and I'm going to change that font to black right now. And actually, I do not want to do AFC. I want to do AFL, and I do want this to be all caps, AFL. And if I select this typeface and go to my typefaces up here, there's this one that is called Nefer Regular. Kind of an old school looking font, and I'm going to change this font size, this typeface size, to where it's not huge. Let's see what. 36 might be a little big. Let's try 30. I think 30 looks pretty darn good. And once I have that done, then I can go down here to my path selection tool. And if I click and drag, I can kind of change, I can rotate this around that ellipse a little bit. So there's AFL, looks good. And then I'm going to take this ellipse and kind of move it down here out of the way now that I know what I'm doing, and I'll select my horizontal type tool again, and this time I'm going to type in football. football, I'll need to make that typeface much smaller. So maybe 12, maybe 14. And when I go back here to this direct path selection tool again, I can click and drag. And if I move this underneath and then kind of drag up, kind of have to play around with it, it's hard, but then we can get that football to show up inside there. So football looks pretty crunched together. I'm going to hide this ellipse for right now so I can see my text a little easier. And if I select this text, let's try 12 for the font size. And if we go over here to character, we can actually go to this area and we can change that spacing a little bit between those letters. So let's see what like 50 looks like. See what 75 does. That helps us a little bit. We're zoomed in close and this is a raster graphic. So it's going to be a little pixely, you know, but if we were looking at this actual size, it would be out here. So don't be too discouraged. You know, we could have made this with Illustrator, but I think this will be fine for how it is like this. And then I'll move football right here. That looks good. And for the AFL, I will go ahead and move this down a little bit lower to right there. And I think that looks pretty good. All right. So there's that. We have that little logo done, simple little logo. And so let's make a new layer somewhere beneath that logo. And this one is going to be an ellipse tool again. And if I draw this ellipse, then I can change the color to white. I'll just place this up here in this corner. Put it about like that, kind of even, you know, between the top left and bottom border. And let's select AFL and football in our little football shape. Move that up to here. I'm going to convert this to a smart object and Control T this. Shrink it down just a little so that it fits into that circle. Alright, and I think that will work for what we want to do. As far as the color for this goes, we can go, oops, close out of that. We can give this, double click here and go with the color overlay. And we can select that and then go with the blue if we want to. Or we can use like D30000. Get this red in there. I don't dislike that. Yeah, I think that will work good in there. And again, if you don't like that color and you want to go with the blue, you can change that out if you'd like. Alright, so that looks good. Once we have that finished, then type tool again, and now we can type in Centennial Bowl. Highlight that text and make it be white. And the typeface for this is going to be one that is called Retrock. I like how this looks. And with this one here, we have this big space, natural space between these paragraphs there. So over in our properties section for the characters, we can click there and we can kind of adjust that to where it fits in there a little bit better. And if I move this over here and maybe space this out appropriately to the side and then Control T, and I can make this be a little bit bigger. Kind of appropriately sized on there, and I think that looks pretty good. Maybe that is a little too big. I'll give myself just a little bit more room on the right hand side there. And center it in that space so that it looks right. Alright, Centennial Bowl. Here we go. Next thing we can do, add a shape again. Let's go with a rectangle. Put this in here, straighten out the corners again. This one is going to have a stroke which is going to be white around the outside, and the fill is actually going to have no fill, so just choose that white square with the red line going through it. And then over here I can adjust the width of this line, and right now I think I do like 5 pixels for that. I think that looks pretty good. And kind of move this up a little bit and over to the side, probably shift it around a little bit later. And we'll take our type tool and we'll type in admit 1. And when I have that selected, I'm going to make that text be centered. And this one here, I really like this Bebis Neue. I'm not really sure how you say it, but it is seriously probably one of my favorite fonts, even though many may disagree about it being great, but I like it. Okay, then down here we can see it's overlapping because I remembered our last distance between those. So let me go to 72 is still a little bit big for the room. I kind of like 60 for that. And then I can Control T. Shrink this text down and center it in there. Not like that. And we have this admit 1 block here. Now with that text in there, I'm going to change this rectangle width now maybe to 4. Shrink it down just a little bit. And I think I do like that a little bit more. Okay. So we got that on there. Type tool. A lot of type tool today. Very typographic with this design. We're going to go Oakland Raiders. Shrink it down and fit it in this space here. And I'm going to duplicate that layer. Bring this down. And the second one is going to say Denver Broncos. I do like that typeface for it, but maybe just to give it a little more variety, I will actually switch this one to Team Athleics freeware. Yes. I'm a fan of that. Okay, that looks good. Nice typeface there. relatively close as far as the alignment goes for those two words without having to change too much. And then I'm going to put in a text tool here with a VS for versus, and this one I'll go Arial and black. I'll shrink that down, Control T, resize this. Kind of get this in there, maybe between here, maybe. Let's go a little bit further. I think that'll work. This game, I believe the Raiders won 3-0. Denver wasn't very good at the time. Al Davis came out to the game and was excited when the game was over that just nobody got hurt. Both teams were paid $25,000 to come, and it was raised by people in the community with fundraisers and ticket sales and everything. And Oakland, I believe, went on to win the AFL championship, but then lost in the Super Bowl, because in those days they had the AFL and the NFL. They each had their own leagues, but then it was late enough, getting close enough to the merger, where the two teams, the best from each one, would play in what is known now as the Super Bowl. So I think Oakland won that game, that championship game, but I think they lost the Super Bowl. I'm not 100% sure, but something like that. Pretty cool. All right, so moving that down, admit one, I'll move back up one, just kind of fine tuning that a little bit. Using the same Team Athleics font that we did for those names. And I'll Control T to resize this. And just in the space below there, in that leftover room, I want to type in 1:30. I'm not sure what time it was. I could not find the time of the game. 1:30 p.m. Sunday. I do know it was on Sunday, on August 27th, 1967. I've seen like a few articles that were later written about the game, and not a lot of details. I couldn't find what time the game started on anything. Couldn't really find any stats on any of the league websites. So I'm guessing on the time because Oakland did have some other games played at 1:30 during those. We don't know the time. And here we go. And I did see a cool program that was either for sale on eBay or somewhere on my going down the rabbit hole searching about this game, and it was kind of cool. It had some autographs on it. I don't know whose, and it had, just stuff for the program that you would normally see on an old school program. Would be kind of neat to have. So here we go. I think that looks pretty good. Looks decent. I'm going with kind of neutral stuff here for the colors because it was at a neutral site. I don't know if they had ones just for Raiders, one just for Broncos. If you wanted to, you could actually put a little Raider logo in there if you're a Raiders fan, or Broncos if you're a Bronco fan. And then you could use the color scheme of the actual teams. I think that would be kind of cool. Finally down here, we will put in Bauer, B-A-U-E-R, field. I would have to ask a North Platte historian. I'm not sure when the football field got the name Bauer Field, but I'm going with this because that's what it is called now. So Bauer Field. and then I'm going to go North Platte, Nebraska. Control T this to shrink it a little bit, and I think I'm going to switch this typeface here back to that Davis New Way. One day I'll learn how to actually pronounce it. Alright, resize this and have it kind of, it's that top layer up there. Okay, so if this down here, and I align this up with kind of that G down below, what I think I could actually do is find the rectangle that I used for this and maybe space this out to there. Yeah, and then we can go back over to this admit one here, and also include the 130. Just forgot about that. And then I could actually Control T that, resize this part, have it take up a little bit more room. A lot of those tickets were kind of cluttered with information. Several of the tickets had some things at the end, at the very bottom, that said something along the lines of like no refunds or anything like that. I don't know if they worried about that in North Platte, Nebraska for this. So I'm just kind of rolling with this right here. So I'm not too worried about that part. Okay, then the last text for this, I think we can put this over here. I'll just overlap it, and this is going to have the typeface of I like this High School USA Sans regular for this. Something that could have been like mass printed or whatever. And if I select that typeface, and I'm going to have it match this red up here, and rotate it here and make this smaller so it's about like that, I think. And with this text, I don't know, I'm just going to say like section 3. It's a different stadium now, I think. So I don't know how that amounts to be or what they really did for the actual tickets, but nowadays you can pretty much sit wherever. That looks good, and then I might just arrow this one over a couple. And then I'll move this here. And just because it seems like on a lot of those tickets, it's never quite printed on there perfectly. Control T. Get it just off-centered a little bit to make it look a little bit more authentic. I think this looks kind of cool. It's fun. Alright, so those are done. We have those on there. And we'll put this on the very top layer. This graphic that I found, just the old, or no, not that one, my bad. This one here. This old paper picture that is from Unsplash. So I'll just fit this on here to where it barely fits on, to where we don't have too many of the tears or anything on the edge. Put that on there like that, I think. Okay, and with this over the top of the picture, I can go here to the blending modes, and let's go multiply. Get this over the top, just to have that old paper look with this. And if we go up here to the top and image and adjustments, brightness, contrast, we can bring that contrast up all the way, and I might even just bring down this brightness just a hair to kind of get those little old marks of the paper to show through. So like maybe -35, and I think that looks all right. I'm going to click OK. Once you have that done, that's the main part. You could be done there if you want. This next part I'll show you, just kind of optional. I'm going to go new, and let's just say, like, I don't know, we could go like 8 inches by 8 inches, just because I know that's going to be bigger size. And black and white for the colors here. Unlock the background layer, go into the layer style, and we can select gradient overlay. Normal, 10 for the opacity. I use this a lot. And gradient, we're going to go transparent to black. It's underneath basics. And radial, 150 for the scale. And so it's just real subtle, kind of darker around the outside a little bit. If you want to change that scale a little, you can, you know, to fit it in there like that if you want to. It's not horrible. You can bring it down to 80 if you want. So kind of wherever you want that to be, however you want it to look. And then we'll click OK. Then going back here, all right, so once I have all of these layers selected, including the background, I'm going to unlock the background as well, and then select everything. Then I can right click and duplicate layers, right click and merge layers, or convert to smart object. There we go. And then I have this, basically a copy of that image that was back there. Okay, and if you have all the other layers, or you even just to double check, you may want to select around the outside, go up to image and crop, just to make sure you don't have any leftover pixels or anything floating out there. If I bring the smart object over here to this tab of my new document I created and drag it in here, then I have my ticket. Alright, and using my eraser tool, there's a couple different ones you can have. This rough ink one might work. We will have to right click and rasterize the layer, or you can use a mask. You can use a layer mask if you want. And using this eraser here on the very edge of this ticket, I can click and then just drag along that side. I'm going to go over it a couple times just to kind of wear in there a little bit too, you know, and then I'll come down here. Just going to go right along kind of those edges. You don't want to go too far on it because it'll reach out a little bit further than what you think. think that looks pretty good. So if I control click the ticket, then it's going to select for the majority most of the ticket on here. And then, so I held down control, clicked in there, then I can go control shift I to select around it, then press delete, duplicate this layer, okay, and then I'm going to click OK. And we have a top layer and a bottom layer. The bottom of the ticket ones, if I use control L to bring up my levels and I bring the white arrow all the way to the left and I click OK, basically it's going to take that shape and fill it all in as black. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. One looks pretty good. Two might be a little too high. Could go 1.5. Kind of however you want to do that. I'm probably going to stay with, I'll go 1.5. Split the difference. Alright. So I'll click OK. Bringing back this picture now. And now what we can do is we can actually go to Edit, Transform, and Warp. Okay, and what I like to do on this is just starting on the bottom left hand corner, just going to kind of bring this up to about right here. This top one here I'll bring down and in a little bit. I can bring this one maybe to the side here. And bring this one out this way just a little bit. Alright, and then with the shadow layer, because that's a little strong right there to look at, we can bring down that shadow just a little bit behind it so we can, kind of to the point where you can see the shadow. You don't want it to where it looks super imposing, And then if you need to move that a little bit if you don't like where some of it's at, so I might just kind of go about right here. And then you can select both if you want, and then kind of rotate it and put it on there like that. And there you have it. You got your old looking ticket for an event, playing around with some typefaces and imagining what it would have looked like back in the day. So hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. I think it would be cool, you could look at other tickets that have been made or other events, design programs and things like that, and kind of play around with that as much as you want, and I think it's something that definitely would be fun to do, and see what kind of things you can create. Also would be fun to use, like if you're teaching this stuff at a school or whatever, or if you're involved with like school plays and things like that, maybe you want to use it as a way to kind of make some of the props come to life in that sense too. So, but there you have it. So let me know what you think in the comments, and I appreciate you watching. We'll catch you on the next tutorial.